Good morning. We're going to be going through Lawson's Lease Management module and do a little bit of a functionality overview and a system walkthrough. We'll go through and look at our agenda here. Like I said, we'll just go through kind of in a PowerPoint bullet format the functionality overview of lease management, just hit on some highlights. I know some of you might be familiar with it or might be fairly logical, but also what are the typical processes that this is replacing? So the spreadsheets, and so forth. Who the product's for? You know, is this a good product for your organization to consider? Like I said, we'll go through the product walkthrough. This is a semi-live demo, so it's a recorded demo. There's always some technical challenges with talking through that, but hopefully it gives you a good visual representation. It's about 10 minutes, but we'll pause a few times in between. Then we'll go through some reporting and analysis. And then also the new accounting standards and lease requirements coming up in a couple years. We'll give you just a bit of an overview of that, and as Keith mentioned, we'll have Q&A towards the end, but feel free to start logging your questions along the way. So real quickly, RPI, I know many of you are familiar with RPI, but we are an Infor Alliance partner. We are Cloud Suite specialized. We were one of the first two, I believe, in the Lawson space. So we know all of the intricacies of dealing with the cloud. So if you're a current cloud customer or looking to go there in the future, we've been through those challenges. We're based in Baltimore, but we do have offices in Tampa and Kansas City as well as Scottsdale. We have nationwide coverage as far as our consultants and really pretty much cover every aspect of the Lawson ecosystem that you can imagine. So under the functionality overview, as I mentioned, Zach will kind of run through some high-level aspects of the lease management module here.
Okay, so we'll start it off. Functionality overview. What is lease management? It's an integrated solution. It's integrated with AM, AP, GL, and AC. Out of those, AM, AP, and GL are the prerequisites. And it'll help you automate, process, account for, analyze, and pay both operating and capital leases. So you will be able to define and maintain the leases and the related assets. It'll manage rent, lease payments, and the related reoccurring costs. Create and approve lease payments, invoices, and interface them to AP, as we talked about. And it'll create the journal entries in GL. So scheduled rent increases and decreases. Lawson will be able to account for this. The rental expense can be amortized over the lease term on a straight line basis if that's what you require, and this will include the rent holidays. And date code notifications. These are user-defined date codes, and they can be attached to a lease to help determine when an event's going to take place. So if it's going to expire, there's an option, renewal, those sorts of things. It'll help notify you for that. And the date code projections is going to be on LM21. On the Dates tab, and you'll see here we have EXP as a date code, and the description is lease renewal. So on 6/30/2020 is when we have it to notify us that this needs to be renewed. Set it up at the bottom there, and after you set it up, you need to be able to be notified when these date codes take place. So you're not going to go into each lease and check individually at the end of every month or quarter. You're going to run the LM207, search for the date code EXP as we had before, and you want to make sure you do include leases, so set this indicator to Y.
And just quickly, Zach, so that date code is user-defined, right? So we might set up different date codes for different things that we want to report on, so when they're expiring or other events, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay, just wanted to make sure.
So this is a little snapshot of the report. So you're going to see that for the EXP date code, we have a couple codes that popped up on the leases, multiple companies, because we had the parameters set a little open for that. And when we run this, we'll be able to be notified when these date codes are occurring.
Right. So by be notified, we mean if it's easy to go back, we need to run a report. So this is something that our customers would probably normally run on a monthly basis for EXP type, like 90 days out. So at least they know, okay, here are the leases coming up due. Some of them rent leases might have optional renewals or extensions on them, or they might need to renegotiate or replace some vehicles. So it's not really proactively notifying you. You do have to run the report,
Yes.
but at least it's a way to track all of your leases, kind of know, rather than sorting through a spreadsheet or whatever you might do now. And the other thing that I know you were mentioning to me is that some of our customers have wanted some more proactive notification, and I think we've designed an IPA flow to go through periodically here. I think, would be a great use for, I don't think we've done it yet, but for a smart notification as well. But at least something there to, and then attach some workflow to that if different users need to be notified. So, but nonetheless, this date can be there to report on or get notifications on.
Okay, so what processes will LM replace if you don't already have it implemented? So first of all, it will perform the FAS 13 lease classification test, and this is going to be the test that will determine whether it's an operating or a capital lease. It integrates with asset management systems to account for and maintain the leased assets. Payment schedule and due dates, amounts including additional costs and taxes, insurance, and maintenance. So those would be your executory costs. And it'll automatically calculate and create interest entries for capital leases via the LM 180. And for the invoice numbers, it's capable of generating a lease name plus the payment number. So we're going to have a lease for an Audi R8. So it'll say Audi R8 001 for the first payment, followed by 002, and so on, so on. And then invoice routing and approval before being paid. So you will be able to set the approval code so that you can set some controls for that matters. The FAS 13, I'm not going to go through the entire FAS 13 for you. It is a little bit complicated, but you're going to see this is the test, again, to determine capital or operating leases. You can see at the end of this flow chart. And it's going to start off with questions such as ownership transferred at the end of the term. Does it contain a bargain purchase option? Is land greater than or equal to 25% of the fair market value of the asset? Then you're going to get into some discount rate calculations. And finally, is the present value of the minimum lease payments greater than or equal to 90% of the fair market value. So it gets a little complicated. Again, one of the benefits of having the lease management module do this for you. Straight line deferred rent. So what if your monthly payments vary in amount, but you're required to expense straight line amount each month? Like we said, Lawson can accommodate you for that. You're going to use the LM21. And you will need to set up a deferred rent account if you are using the straight line method. As well as on the LM30, you need to indicate that yes, you are using the straight line accounting method. Get back here. All right, so on the LM131, this is where you're actually going to be creating the invoices. Creates the expense and deferred rent distribution, and the difference will be paid in AP. And if for some reason the straight line amount that Lawson has calculated is not correct for that month, so if you had 500 and it needs to be 525 or something like that, there is an override amount field, which we have here on the LM30.5, and you can calculate that yourself, populate it, and override.
Yeah, and just on that note, there are some tricks as you're initially implementing this module for your straight line leases. If you're partway through, say, a 5-year office lease, and it is an escalating rent that you have been booking these accruals for, essentially, we'll need to kind of trick the system if you're 3 years left on that 5-year lease. We can do that by either outside before we do the conversion, calculating it and doing an override, or we can put in the full history and then do some fake payments for those old rent payments in order to convert that in, and then have it automatically have the correct straight line amount in there. Just a little challenge that I've run into before.
So, is lease management for you? First question you need to ask is, do you have a large number of leases? If you only have a handful of leases, it might not be worth implementing the entire module. But if you have hundreds of them, it could definitely save you a lot of time and make your life easier. Capital leases with the FAS 13 requirements, as we went over earlier. Not everyone wants to run that FAS 13 for each lease, and this help you make sure it's classified correctly. Are you using straight line calculation maintenance? We showed you can easily do that through the module. Are you manually processing AP payments for a ton of leases? So when you're manually doing a ton of things repetitively, you can miss payments, you can pay incorrect amounts, and this will help consolidate the data and make sure that you don't miss any payments. Varying lease payment schedules or hard to maintain reoccurring AP invoices. Again, helps make sure everything gets paid correctly on time, and just consolidated data make everything easier to track. And do you currently have spreadsheet intensive management and controls? So if you're doing everything on a spreadsheet for hundreds of invoices, this can replace that and take away a little bit of the headache. So we're going to go through a product demo, which is going to demonstrate just the whole quick overview of the process through lease management. We're going to start with defining a lease, the payment schedule, the FAS 13 test, creating the associated assets, and then releasing the lease. Once the lease is released, we can create invoices, adjust them if need be, approve the invoices, interface them into AP, and then an option is to calculate the interest if we are using the capital lease. So we're going to go to our video we have.
So just give us a couple seconds here to switch over to the video.
All right, so we're going to start off on LM21, the Lease Additions and Adjustments form. And we can pause it here. So you're going to see that we have Company 1, Lease 1 set up for the lease is an Audi R8. So the type is a car. Classification is a capital because we already ran the FAS 13, but we'll get into that. The lease term is 60 months. The date range is set up for those 60 months, and the total remaining life is still at 60 months. You'll notice the ownership flag is set to no. We will not own this at the end of the lease term, and that's again part of the FAS 13 test. So we can hit play, and we're going to go over to the Accounts tab, and we'll pause it here. This is where we set up the currency for US dollars, and if you have a down payment or any kind of security deposit amount that you're going to pay at the beginning of the lease, you want to put in that information here, as well as the residual guaranteed amount and the bargain purchase amount, again part of the FAS 13 test. So if we get to the land tab, we'll pause here real quick. This is only going to be used if it's a land only or land and building asset or lease. If that's not the case, you can skip over this tab and go to the payment tab. On the payment tab, this is where we're going to have a bulk of the information. So the current lessor we have set up here for LA Police Gear. 12 payments a year indicated that we're going to pay at the beginning of the month with the B in the payment timing. If you want to pause it, we can enter the first payment date, which is going to be 9/1, and then the interest rate that we're going to be paying on this lease. On a capital lease, you will need to put the interest account information at the bottom here, as well as the debt expense account for every lease. You'll have to populate that form.
Okay. Is this where we're designating, this is an AP vendor, correct, that we're selecting
Yes.
here? So this is how it's going to know how to create the invoice. Okay.
Correct.
Didn't mean to jump ahead, but...
Thank you. So if we get to the executory cost tab, again, these are the supplemental costs, so they'll be insurance, CAM, taxes, those sorts of things. And you can enter as many as you need. Again, the corresponding activities, so you can use the cost tracking activities for those. That's how it's going to integrate with AC. And you're just putting your executory code, company, and the account, so you can attach those to your leases. If we want to hit play and get over to the FAS 13, as I said earlier, you can see that we already ran this. Lease classification is a capital. If for some reason you needed to have this marked as an operating lease, there is an override option, so you can do that. And then we'll get to the dates tab here. So the date codes. Pause. This is what we talked about earlier. This is where you're going to set your date codes if you need to be reminded for the renew, any sorts of important milestones for the lease.
Excellent. And I know later you're going to get into some more examples on the executory costs, right?
Yes. So once that is set up, we're going to need to set up the payment schedule.
Here's where all the magic happens, right?
So you're going to see that the payment is $500 a month set up here. If you can pause it real quick. The payment number is going to be listed here. It's going to go down. We're just going down, so you see payments 10 through 18 here. You can attach the executory cost code, authority code. Again, we have to set that up so that it can be approved when invoicing or integrating into AP. The due date, beginning of the month, so you'll see it's marked as the first of each month. And this is just scrolling through, shows you the due dates, how it's going to populate for each payment number that changes on the side here, $500 a month each time. So you don't have to populate this 500 in each line. You don't have to set that up. If it's going to be consistent, you can click on this reoccurring button here and set it all up in one line. So wait for this to load. You'll see that payment number starting with the first payment number, 460 payments. Frequency is monthly, where you're going to pay the $500 as the reoccurring amount. The due date 9/1. And when we add that line, it will automatically populate the previous screen we were looking at with all of the data for $500 each payment.
It's a little bit easier.
Yes, a lot easier, saves you a lot of time. The first screen is an option if you have varying payments and things are going to change.
Timing.
If you need to customize it, yeah. So you have two options there. Wait for the video.
But we can accommodate some varying payments in the recurring tab.
Yes.
I think maybe we can get into that.
LM 131, this is the invoice creation where we're actually going to create the invoices. So set up like any other job, company one, lease one like we were dealing with before. Lease classification or lease type, you can sort by which ones you want to create the invoice for. You can do them all in one swoop. Invoice date is important. You want to set that. That's going to be the post date for AP when it gets into AP. Due date and the distribution date. So we set those up and we're going to quick submit this job. And when we view this in Print Manager, you'll be able to see that the invoices were created.
And probably your normal process would not be just to run it for one lease.
No.
We're just showing you an example here.
This is just a quick overview.
Yeah.
So we get into the Print Manager and we're viewing this, and you'll be able to see that the invoice was created. And a nice note is anything in blue here, you can click on and drill around for more information, and you'll see the amount 500 and all the other invoice information.
Okay, it looks like we're going over to LM31.
So if you create your invoice and you need to make a change to it on LM31, that's where you're going to adjust your invoice. So like I said, we have the Audi R80001 as the invoice number, but if we wanted to change this to match the vendor's invoice number, we could do that on this form. So we have inquired, and I think it's just here going to show you that we can change the invoice name. And yep, so we're changing the invoice name just to match the vendor. Any other information you can change. It's not approved yet, it's not released, so after the 131, it's not final. You can still make your changes on 31. And you'll see that we were able to change that. And again, still in the unapproved status, so you can make all the changes you want.
Okay. So it's still in the LM module at this point.
So it is still in the LM module, so we need to approve the invoice payment, again with the authority code. So company 1, authority code 1, and you have the option to change or approve and interface to AP. We're just going to change it right here. Make sure you mark the approved on the right-hand side to yes, and we're just going to approve this one solely. So once we hit change, this will be approved and ready. The video to catch up. All right, so LM 136. This is the mass payment approval. So if you don't want to go into each line and approve each lease individually, you can do them all in one. So run it as any other job. Sort by lease classification, lease type, and authority code, so you can do the ones that are relevant for you and approve them all with one job. So if you have hundreds of leases, this is definitely a time saver. Now we're going to get to the LM140, which is the actual AP interface. This is when we're going to pull it into the AP module. So we're going to run this company one, lease one, the through invoice date, again, is important. That's the date that AP will have. And you have the option of running this in update or non-update mode. So we change this job, we're going to submit it, and when we view this in Print Manager, you should be able to see that it did make its way into AP. We click on this. And you see the header with company one, lease one, the Audi R8 lease, and here it is. So the invoice did make its way into AP. There's also another way you can check. So if you're going to get to your AP, wait for this to catch up. Get into AP 30, and we can inquire on the vendor. So if we enter the vendor we had set up, LA Police Gear, you'll see the invoice below has made its way in. So that's just a double check to make sure that the interface did work.
In a released status, I believe.
Yes.
Yep. So this was a capital lease, so.
Yep. So the interest calculation on LM180, you will want to calculate that. So again, normal job, calculating through date for this period, company one, lease one, and we're going to submit this. And you'll be able to see the principal and interest amounts along with the total in the port here. So here we are. You'll see the interest and principal amounts is $45.29, $454.71, totaling to the $500 payment we made, and everything looks great.
So you got your invoice ready to pay, you got your GL balance sheet all taken care of here and everything too.
And then the lease posting, the one LM190 is going to be a lot like your GL190, where you're actually going to post it.
Oh.
So now we are.
Now we are. Jump in the gun.
Submit this, and you'll be able to see that it posted successfully. So here we go. And the lease posting report below, capital leases, and then you also have the posting error report, which we will not have anything because it was just for this lease, and it was successful.
Riveting.
Absolutely.
Yes. All right, well.
Okay, and we can actually end the video because the only last slide we're going to talk about next anyway.
So hopefully that gave everybody a good picture, just kind of an overview of start to finish. Obviously there are some other pieces here. I think we have a few other screenshots that we added maybe to highlight a few other aspects outside of the video.
Let's see if this one's too. Executory costs and varying payments, as we spoke about before. Right. You can have your CAM and your insurance here. Again, the activities. Yeah, we already talked about this. You can see the status. The lease is released.
Yeah.
And varying payments. So this is where you can set up, again, starting with payment 61 for 60 payments monthly. You're going to have the CAM reoccurring amount, and then after that you're going to have the insurance being a reoccurring amount monthly as $115.85. Right.
So, and just while you're here, so this might be something, say on a long-term office lease, that you know you're going to start at $10,000 a month for the first year. It's going to go up 5% per year, something like that. And then you also know that my starting CAM, well, maybe the first year might be your base year and might be zero, but going forward, you might put in an ongoing CAM and insurance and any other costs there. But this would normally have additional lines for the other years, right? So it might be payment number 1 for 12 months at $10,000, then payment number 13 for 12 months for $10,500 and so forth. So you can build it all out here in advance, and you don't have to have reminders of, oh, I got to up that recurring AP payment to the higher amount in 12 months. So go ahead.
Okay.
What happens when they charge like retroactive CAM?
Right, so a lot of times that's reality, and basically, so say we know our CAM in this example is $185.75 for 2017, but then it's probably not until April until they've calculated it for 2018 based on all the actual expenses for the whole building and then our prorated share. So we're going to be paying this $185 for a few months next year, most likely. That's a normal occurrence, but then it goes up to $250. So what we can do is come in here and update the payment schedule to be $250 going forward, and then we could put just a one-time payment for the difference for those 3 months where we kind of underpaid. So that's a very, very normal thing that happens, yeah.
Okay. And this is again showing how we can make the payments differ. It'll be a 3% increase starting with payment 5 up to $515 a month. Again, increase.
So those are the detailed payment by payment screen that came from the recurring.
Yes.
Right. And of course you can manually adjust them here as well.
So new lease requirements. Starting in 2019, there will be new requirements for accounting purposes for your leases, and essentially everything will need to go on the balance sheet, whether it's an operating or a capital lease. So the FASB is going to be domestic regulating agency, and the IFRS is going to be international. They don't always stay consistent, so if you do have international business, you need to keep that in mind so that you stay compliant. The dates for when it starts, you can click on the blue link and you'll be able to learn a little bit more information about this. If you already have leases, you're probably already aware, but it'll depend on when the fiscal year for your company starts in 2019.
So, big question. How is this module going to keep up with these things?
That is a great question. So I opened up a ticket with Infor, and they are working on it. It's still in the mix. They don't have anything released yet, but I was told that it is coming soon, and we will have answers for that.
Yeah, so we'll start testing that out, and they also threw in there that they would love to have some early adopters. So if anybody's currently using it or thinking of implementing it soon and want to test out the new functionality, we might be able to get a bat line into the product development people to help them out with that.
And one more thing, that since they will all be on your balance sheet, that they will all fall under your capital expenses budget, so that's another thing to keep in mind. All right, so I think Greg's going to cover some of the things you need to consider when you're actually implementing lease management.
Yeah, just a few high-level things here. Of course, gathering the data for your current leases is really important, and you might have that in a spreadsheet, but it might not have some of the details that kind of a two-dimensional space of data like a spreadsheet might have, as far as when things are changing as far as payments and so forth, and perhaps you don't have it noted on there that you might have some options for the end of the lease to extend at pre-negotiated rates or something like that. If you do, great. That will have to be organized into kind of a convertible file, which is a little bit tricky. I'm going to need some help with that. Overall, the module is very logical, but getting data into it, especially historical or more complex leases for those payment schedules, does take some work. So if you have the capital leases asset, the AM module is required. Most of you probably are using the AM module, but just in case not. There are some things that you might want to use attributes, just like in other modules. There are attributes in the LM module that you can put some demographic information, if you will, about the lease that might be, that you might not want to have to go into AP to look for. So this was a suggestion that one of our colleagues made here. And then again, invoice numbers, you'll see will have that prefix, like we had the Audi prefix there, and those can be changed, and then it'll just increment up from there. And it can be changed kind of globally for all payments going forward. Or you saw Zach point out in the video how we could change one individual invoice before it went over to AP.
Okay. So lease reporting and analysis. You'll have a couple analysis tools like the invoice inquiry, lease analysis, and executory cost analysis, and then a couple of reports, the big one being the LM430, which is lease projections. I'm going to go through a couple of those here. So the LM90, this is where you're going to view lease payment information. You'll be able to see that the vendor, the name, the status is released, if we calculated the interest or not, and the total amount. The LM94 is going to be pretty similar. You'll also be able to see the beginning and ending balance. So that's another helpful tool, and that's with the executory cost analysis. LM430, this is the big one for lease projections. It's going to show you the big picture. You'll see year to year, first, second, third, fourth year for payment, interest, and executory costs. At the bottom, you also see the net present value of the lease payments. We scroll all the way to the bottom of this report. You'll see even bigger picture, total for capital leases, operating leases, and all of your leases overall. All right, and final summary.
Yeah, so probably goes without saying here. I mean, it's a powerful tool, but it is also a manageable module for to implement. It's not a huge implementation effort. You know, it's really kind of data dependent. A lot of times we do find that our customers can do a good portion of the project if they choose to, you know, with some guidance and leadership from us. So it can be a streamlined process to implement this. I think, you know, really the three reasons, and maybe you only have to have two of these three reasons or some combination of them, but now there are three with the upcoming changes. So you have a good number of leases. I mean, we don't want to implement this, as you mentioned, for 20 leases. It is going to add some complexity as far as another process that has to be run on a periodic basis, another module that has to be closed and so forth. But you want to maybe track them better, have a better data repository. So I think that you know, a better data repository to maintain these leases is reason number one. Second of all is just kind of being able to interface it over to AP, so to try to make your ongoing process a little bit easier if you do have a good volume of leases. And then really that third is we're hearing a lot more of now is obviously there are the accounting standards that they're going to have to abide by. So you know, here's something to maybe let's do it in the tool before we create all these other spreadsheets and things to figure it out and have a process to accommodate that. So, and obviously, like most things, you know, proper planning and testing is critical. Testing is a little bit tricky sometimes because you kind of have to simulate different time periods that you're going to run these leases for, and once you've paid them, you've paid them. So now when we do another testing cycle, you have to look at kind of your closing controls and stuff as well. So you will need to obviously be doing this in the test system and coordinate your testing efforts. Okay, and next, just a little bit of a plug for our IPA symposium, our Infor Process Automation Symposium. Probably many of you have heard it's been a lot of popularity, a lot of people signing up at the end of the Southeast Mega, September 20th. There's a link on our page. There's our NASCAR car that we sponsored. I didn't know that yet, but didn't really approve that expense, but we'll see how that comes through. So go ahead and find out some more information here and see if it might be something you want to tack on. Then we have some more webinars coming in December, the week of. It's December 4th, I believe. All right, we are to the fun part, questions.
Do you have any questions?
So we got some questions, but I'm going to tackle the first few.
Okay.
So, will slides be available to be printed? Yes, if you would like to get a copy of the PowerPoint, we will happily send that to you. Please just reach out to us, rpi@rpic.com, or questions@rpic.com. Again, we'll also send the link so that you can rewatch it. Another question is, guessing your demo version 10, do you know if Infor has built this into version 11? The answers to both is yes. That was version 10 we were looking at.
Correct.
And yes, it is built into a version 11, or also known as FSM Cloud Suite. How long has the module been a part of the portfolio offering for Lawson? It's been quite a while now.
I think it's been quite a while. I think I first started working with it, feels like about 7-8 years ago.
Yeah, 2010-ish.
Yeah. So and
It'd already been out for a few years too.
it feels like it had been, and honestly, it's not something that really is so widely adopted, and it's not evolving that quickly. So I mean, it's a fairly stable module. Yeah. So this is not bleeding edge stuff here, if that was the implication.
Okay. The questions escalate in complexity here, but
Okay.
another nice, easy one. What do you see as the general implementation time frame? I will say this is something that varies quite a bit, and it lends itself to what I'll call a soft live. You know, you could go live with like 5 leases, and that can be done in 4 to 6 weeks pretty easily. Like, let's say you have 1,000 that you're converting in, that's going to take some time. It just doesn't have to be big bang. You can just start transitioning them.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, we recently had a couple different customers go live in, I think, less than 6 weeks. So it can definitely be done very quickly and painlessly. I've heard that you can use contract management for some of this. That I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, so I'm not sure how you would use it. I don't believe, I'm not a contract management expert, I apologize, but I don't believe that there's any interface over to AP for the actual payments, or potentially even AM or something. I believe, obviously, that you can use contract management to store your contracts, which leases effectively are contracts, and have dates and expirations.
Right. It's like, I think the question is about
there.
interfacing data from contract management to the lease management module.
Okay, I am not aware of that capability, but that's definitely something we'll check into and get back to the group if that is a possibility, because it sounds logical.
Right. And so next question, can this be used for leases we bill to our customers, or is this strictly for AP vendor leases?
Yeah, so this is geared towards your leases that you are paying, right? So obviously there is the reverse of having leases that you have for property that you own that you're leasing out. I haven't seen any customers use a part of this. It's definitely designed for the ones that go through that you pay through AP. Maybe there could be some classification of a lease if you just want to use the data repository and not have any of the accounting's not really set up for the incoming payments by no means, no. But maybe you can use it as a database in a creative way.